Welcome everyone to Career Conversations, a University of Rochester virtual series developed to help you to leverage your existing talents, build new skills, keep up with industry trends, pursue new ideas, and navigate your personal and professional journey. We invite you to check out previous presentations in the Career Conversations webinar library. This event is brought to you in partnership with the newly formed Women's Network, whose mission is to harness and celebrate the rich contributions of women around the globe who are part of the University of Rochester family. Through dynamic programming and engaging conversations, the network will help members connect and support one another. I am Abby Zabradsky, undergraduate class of 2014 and Simon class of 2019. I serve on the university's alumni board and as a co-chair of the Women's Network Personal and Professional Development Committee. Before I introduce Rachel, I want to mention we will only be recording Rachel's presentation. We will not be recording the Q&A so that attendees feel comfortable asking questions on or off camera. We encourage you to send questions to Michelle Cavalcanti using the chat box. Please send privately to Michelle. You can write, "I have a question," and Michelle will call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can send the written questions to Michelle Cavalcanti and indicate you would like her to read your question for you. Feel free to also use the chat throughout Rachel's presentation. There's closed caption available in the navigation bar. Now I'd like to introduce Rachel Roberts, who will be presenting today on the gender wage gap and how to determine our own personal value and develop techniques for salary negotiation. Rachel Roberts has navigated both the nonprofit performing arts and higher education sectors, having held unique positions in both. In 2018, Rachel was named Associate Professor of Music Leadership and was this summer promoted to Director of Eastman School of Music's Institute for Music Leadership. Rachel graduated in 2003 from the Eastman School of Music and Flute Performance. Rachel holds a master's degree in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. A student of the Special Studies program, she designed coursework to focus on leadership and organizational development, specifically to investigate the best practices for designing learning communities. While in Boston, Rachel was also an active participant in Boston Mayor Marty Walsh's initiative to eliminate the gender wage gap. While there, she volunteered to lead 32 AAUW, American Association of University Women, salary negotiation workshops, educating over 850 women throughout Boston. As a member of AAUW, Rachel has spurred a university-wide partnership to bring the AAUW salary negotiation workshops to the University of Rochester community in partnership with Alumni Relations and has led several workshops for alumni and students. Rachel is currently pursuing her education doctorate from the Warner School of Education at the University of Rochester with a focus in higher education leadership. And now I will turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Abby, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing your lunch hour. I know this is an important topic and it's one that I resonate with. I attended one of the full workshops back in 2016. That's what piqued my interest to become a facilitator. Often salary negotiations are not discussed or not talked about. What AAUW has done is open the door for a systemic, a thoughtful, and a practical way to equip everyone and make accessible to everyone the basic steps towards preparing for salary negotiations. My experience is in facilitating the salary negotiation workshops and my own personal experience working in nonprofits. I fully understand that there are nuances with different disciplines, working with headhunters, other types of avenues. Those, unfortunately, are beyond my skill sets. But what I facilitate and what I'm passionate about is the information that AAUW has developed. To date, I've facilitated 45 different workshops and worked with over 1,200 individuals. My hope is that in participating in these sessions, whether it's the workshop seminar today or full workshop at a later time, you and other individuals not only gain skills for your own negotiation and advocacy work in gender wage equity, but also for setting a transparent and equitable standards for when you are in the role of a hiring manager. So for the next 45 minutes that we have together, I'd like to share some of the information and statistics about gender wage equity and where it stands today. I'd like to walk through very briefly the steps that AAUW has put out and how to prepare for salary negotiations, and then conclude with an open Q&A. So let me begin by sharing my screen. Okay. As I said before, this information in this workshop is produced and created by AAUW, American Association of University Women. They also not only produce these workshops during in-person events, but the full workshop is offered online for free, anytime, to anyone. I believe Michelle has a link and she will put this in the chat. I would encourage you to review this information and share it with everyone that you know. To begin, let's talk about the gender wage gap. It's the difference between what women and men are paid. Working women full-time in the US are paid 82% of what men earn. And at this current rate of change, we, at least in the United States, will not achieve pay equity until 2093. Of course, this statistic varies by race. And frankly, looking at these numbers is what propels me to keep leading these workshops. It takes all of us to make change happen, whether it's sharing information or being an advocate. As you look at these numbers, I'd like to put it in a firm perspective as to what these percentages mean for lifetime losses. Women overall, at that 82% of what men earn, women overall lose just over $400,000 over the course of their 40-year career. Black women lose just shy of $1 million over the course of their 40-year career. And Latina women lose over $1.1 million over the course of their 40-year career when compared to that national average of what men make. The impact of gender pay gap goes beyond the fact that women overall are paid less than men. It impacts families and future economic security. Mothers, women with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ community are also impacted to varying degrees. And it's not just annual earnings that show a difference. The pay gap also contributes to the wealth gap. This makes it difficult for women to amass savings or to build wealth and achieve economic security. Overall, the average American woman has a net worth of $5,541, less than half of the over $12,000 average net worth of a man. A single woman has 32 cents for each dollar that a man has with this wealth gap. And this wealth gap is even wider for women of color who have just pennies for every dollar that a white male makes. If the pay gap were to close tomorrow, 2.5 million children would be lifted out of poverty in the United States. There are many reasons why women are paid less than men. They're overrepresented in low wage jobs, underrepresented in high wage, and unrepresented in undervalued fields such as healthcare, education, and public administration. They often are discriminated against for being caregivers, and they face barriers of lower pay because of this or discriminated against. AAUW has done further research into this, both the gender pay gap at large, as well as what this means for students graduating out into the field. Just 1 year out of college, women working full-time are already paid significantly less than their male counterparts are paid, 7% or more. There are studies about this, and I believe Michelle will link those in the chat. One way to improve this change is talking about negotiation. That's why these workshops were created. But I often get asked a lot, can negotiations backfire? Most employers have some latitude when setting salaries, and negotiations can pay off. But negotiation skills are especially tricky for women because some behaviors, like self-promotion, that work well for men may backfire for women. The double bind refers to the conflicting demands that women receive around behavior expectations. Women often have two choices: to be seen as competent or to be liked. And often likable women are sometimes seen as incompetent and may not be given stretch assignments that lead towards future growth. Knowing what your skills are worth, making clear what you bring to the table, and emphasizing common goals and maintaining a positive attitude are some of the negotiation tactics that are effective for women. And always remember, if you feel at risk during a negotiation, it is within your power to stop the discussion at any time and ask to revisit it later. That's just a brief background on the advocacy part that AAUW champions and spends a lot of their time researching. I would encourage you to visit their website for more. But for now, I'd like to transition to the material in what AAUW puts together for helping understand how to negotiate your salaries. They have this broken down into 4 steps. And the first step is knowing your value. You are your own best advocate. And the first step in preparing to negotiate is to know your own value. How do you confidently and articulately share the value that you bring to a future employer and the contributions that you will make to your position? And how do you do this in a way that resonates with employers? This may seem intuitive, but for many, this first step requires some behavior change. For many of us, we are not comfortable talking about our accomplishments. For some, there may even be cultural norms in how you were raised that make this topic much more difficult to address. You are your own brand. We hear this a lot in the era of social media and influencing. The materials that AAUW puts together and this workshop will not dig into personal branding, but rather it leads participants through questions to help you articulate how to be your best advocate. No one knows the impact of you and your work as well as you do. Some of the questions that are asked in this workshop includes a self-reflection, working through questions like what differentiates you? How do you bring value to your company or your organization? And what skills, accomplishments, and work experiences demonstrate value or the contributions that you will make to the position that you are seeking? The workshop materials and the booklet, all found through the online salary negotiation workshop or in person, walks you through all of these questions. And it begins here first, prior to putting a resume together. It's important to articulate all of these pieces on a resume, but before you get to that point, it's important to understand the value that you will bring or can bring to an organization. That's why the self-reflective piece and understanding your own brand and the value that you bring is where this workshop begins. This section then concludes by understanding how to articulate a value statement. From the attributes that you will have brainstormed for yourself, you will learn how to frame these types of statements to use in cover letters or in the interviews. This is just a sample of how you can fill in the blank. But what I appreciate in articulating your value through this way is that last fill in the blank has very tangible outcomes that you can talk about, whether it's metrics or money that you have saved the organization. It takes what you believe of yourself and transitions those into hard facts that you can support with data and work experiences. The second step in this workshop is how to know your target salary and benefits. Almost all employers set salary ranges for their jobs, which means all jobs have a worth on the market. It doesn't matter how much you earned at your first job, nor does it matter what your last salary was. Your market value is what an employer is likely to pay you in a particular position. In the full workshop, there are 6 steps to knowing how to benchmark your salary and benefit. This is where things differ by industry. Many of the examples that are easily found online are geared towards for-profit industries, and nonprofits are more mixed or harder to find information for. This has been my whole career, is trying to find information about nonprofits. Yet it's possible to still benchmark and seek preparation, both from the information that's out there and using other strategies. So the first step in here is to research and identify comparable job titles. If you're using a service that's online, such as salary.com, that is recommended over other services such as glassdoor.com. The reason is that salary.com uses employer reported data, where other places like Glassdoor offer data that's sourced from the employees directly. That information may be overreported or underreported. So looking at websites like salary.com that have information reported by the employer will be one metric as to how you can research and identify comparable job titles. You could also do this by looking at your industry that you work in, looking at different companies and identifying what those organizational structures are. And then this step leads into finding the market rate for that type of position and establishing your target salary. Finding the market rate differs based on the location that you live in. A job that has a same title in Washington, D.C. versus Los Angeles, California, will be priced very differently because of the cost of living. So if you use a website like salary.com, it will ask for the zip code that you are looking for this particular position in. That's critically important to understand, because even though the jobs may be the same in terms of the skills required and what's expected, the compensation will be vastly different based on what the community living scale is at. If, like for me, looking in nonprofits, you have difficulty finding those types of comparables, what's often recommended is to look at the job and potentially call HR and ask for a salary range. The goal in benchmarking your salary and benefits is to be able to have all the information available to you so that you know whether or not you want to apply, and this is something that could be a step in the right direction for you. You won't want to go through the entire process only to find out the job is compensated so low that you could never accept that and move. I know oftentimes HR says no calls accepted. And so if that's posted on that job position, perhaps there's other ways you can find out the information. whether it's from a colleague at that organization that you may know, or another colleague who works in the industry who may have some insight into what that position might be valued at. There are many different ways that you can find that market rate, and the goal is to get as much data as you can to understand where it's valued at, and then to incorporate step number one, assessing your value. Where does that match up? So this workshop will take you through understanding, are you on the lower end of that spectrum, or are you on the higher end of the spectrum of where the compensation range for the job is? What determines that is your value, your resume, and your experiences. You'll want to establish that target salary. That is what you are aiming to achieve in applying this position. But thinking ahead, you don't want to have that target salary as the number that you go for when you are preparing for a salary negotiation. You always want to start and look for a target salary range. Knowing that the employer is expecting a negotiation, they will expect you to have a negotiation as well. So aiming higher above what your target salary is where you should estimate as you approach putting a negotiation together. AAUW does not recommend exceeding 20%. So if you are looking at a job that pays $50,000 and your target salary is $50,000, they estimate stretching no more than up to $60,000 for that negotiation, and then being able to come down, hopefully landing at or above your target salary. So that's on the high end. What's on the low end is determining your walkaway point. This might also happen. It's disappointing if for one reason or another, especially after you've invested time and emotional energy into the thought and process of a new position. But if accepting a new job will put you at a financial hardship, you may need to consider for yourself, is this the position, the right one for me right now? Identifying your walkaway point before you get into a negotiation will help prevent you from accepting an offer that you may later regret. Knowing your walkaway point can also be informed by your budget. This is step number 5. In the AAUW workshop and the accompanying workbook, there are beginning tools and resources that will help you understand your monthly and yearly budgets, what's coming in, what's coming out, and what you want to save for. So this is something that all of you should have, and if you don't have, continue refining and building. It will serve you well in many different areas, especially in planning for negotiations and career advancements. And the last step that AAUW puts out is to assess the value of benefits. This is often forgot of, but this is just as important as your salary. Sometimes they are negotiable as well. Certain benefits like health insurance or vacation are usually standard for all employees, but some can be negotiated. Rather than ask for more of everything, it's important to focus on what is important to you. Give your benefits the same objective analysis as you do planning for your target salary and the target salary range. For instance, if it's important to you to continue your own professional development, you might ask if there's a tuition reimbursement policy, or if there's funds to travel to 2 conferences a year for your own professional development. It's important to consider these benefits as you develop your strategy as well. Knowing your strategy is the third step in this AAUW workshop. Developing a negotiation strategy.
You're frozen.
Strategy requires you to be strategic and to, okay, am I live again? I think I just froze for a moment. I'm sorry. Step
You're
three
good.
is knowing, okay, thank you. I apologize. Step three is knowing your strategy. It's important to remember that negotiations should not begin until after an offer has been made. You'll be doing all of this research probably at the same time that you are interviewing, but it's recommended to not officially begin that negotiation until after your offer has been made. There are typically several conversations before you conclude a negotiation. Rarely is it a phone call, yes, accepted, and I'm done, and you hang up. The several conversations help as each party considers the requests, the offers, the counter offers that are going back and forth. And if you get to a point at which you feel like you need time on your own to consider an offer, you should always feel free to ask for that. Often it's pretty common to be offered a position on the phone and then asked for all the materials to be sent to you for your review, including the benefits package, and then schedule another time to talk 24 or 48 hours later. And the tips that are on this slide are really useful as well, especially if these negotiations happen on the phone or on Zoom. It's 100% acceptable to bring your notes into the negotiation, to write down what's important to you, things that you want to say, or even going back to those value statements that you created for yourself in step one. One that always helps me is remembering that negotiation is just a conversation between two people. It's not a battle, it's not anything negative, it's just a conversation for two people to come to terms as to what will match and satisfy both parties' interests. It's also important to remember that negotiations should not get personal. I've worked with students before, and oftentimes they have so many things going through their minds about what it will take for a new job. Moving expenses, car expenses, lease expenses, all of these things. And while that's a really relevant point towards your day-to-day living, what the employer cares about is the value that you will bring to the organization. As you enter into your negotiation and prepare for all of those strategies, it's important to keep it focused on the job and on your professional work. The other pieces matter to your own personal budget. That may fuel your interest in negotiating, but don't bring that into the conversation with the hiring manager or future employer. And anticipate your employer's reactions and responses. At this point in the conversation, they have chosen you. They want to make it work. But in an effort to help you better prepare, you should anticipate maybe what your employer will say when you counter with another offer, and be prepared with 2 or 3 different responses. Again, keeping in mind the whole time, how do you advocate for yourself? The other piece is to understand that in the application stage and maybe during the interview, you might be asked about your salary history or your salary expectations. You should use deflection techniques. You can avoid answering some of these questions, and really this is negotiating until you have an offer in hand. Researchers have found that the salary history question in the hiring process is one of the most pervasive reasons why the gender pay gap still exists. Some cities and some states now prohibit employers from asking for salary history. I would encourage all of you to research the laws in your area and know the rights that you have, what can be asked and what cannot be asked. AAUW has a list of these questions and information to more resources on their website. And then you've been offered the job. Congratulations. Now what do? You will have done all of this preparation, had your negotiation strategy prepared, and had this first conversation, reviewed the offer, the overall compensation package, and decide whether or not to negotiate and to focus on the salary, or perhaps also the benefits. Again, clearly spell out the value that you are bringing to the company. Go back to that step one and those value statements that you articulated. Focus on your professional accomplishments and abilities and remind them why they hired you. An important part of negotiating is learning to respond persuasively. And before entering that negotiation, you should anticipate 3 to 5 ways that an HR rep or hiring manager might respond, and be ready with responses to their requests or objectives. As you give a verbal acceptance of the offer, be certain to ask for it in writing and read it carefully before signing to make certain everything you have discussed is represented fairly. If there's ever a question in the future, what you signed and what's on file in HR is what will hold. The last step in the negotiation is to practice. And as a musician, I can relate to this one. I would never walk on a stage and sight read a concert. So why would you walk into a negotiation having never practiced or prepared what you are going to say? In practicing, get a friend, get a colleague, get a family member, and practice playing the role of both the employee and the employer. If you take the AAUW salary negotiation course, whether it's online or in person somewhere, there's sample scripts for you to begin at the end of those workbooks so that you can practice with the language of, as a candidate, here's how I want to advocate for myself. And then as a hiring manager, here are potential objections that I might have. When you play the role of the employee, you looking for a new position, it gives you a chance to verbalize the values and the skill sets and the qualities that you will bring. It's another practice speaking and talking confidently about yourself. When you play the role of the employer, it gives you a chance to think critically about the objections they may have in response to what you may be advocating for in the negotiation. You could do this a couple times with different people. The more practice you have, the more comfort you likely will have in speaking about yourself, responding persuasively, and being able to ask questions that you may not have prepared for in your own preparations. So again, I can't speak highly enough about the salary negotiation workshop. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to go through the full material. It takes about 2 hours to get through it. But what I've shared today is the highlights of those 4 steps in the process for how you can begin to prepare for your own salary negotiations. The workshop is free and available anytime, anywhere, including the accompanying workbook and links to more resources. But I'd be happy now to transition to a Q&A. If people have typed questions to Michelle, I'll let Michelle help facilitate this. And I appreciate all of you tuning in. I hope this has been beneficial information to have.
Thank you so much, Rachel. As we said in the beginning, the recording will